Good morning everyone. So yesterday we had discussed MSME sector. Today we are going to cover poverty. So it is going to be mains based discussion. So first we are going to discuss what is poverty. What is poverty? What are the types of poverty? Types of poverty. What are the causes of poverty? Causes of poverty. Then we are going to discuss government initiatives or government schemes for poverty eradication, and in the end we are going to discuss the challenges in poverty eradication or poverty reduction. So first thing first, what is poverty? Poverty is a state of deprivation. Poverty is a state of deprivation where we do not have sufficient resources. That means we have insufficient resources for basic minimum needs. Minimum needs. So that is poverty. Poverty means we do not have that much resources that we can fulfill our basic minimum needs or basic minimum requirements. Now, in simplest term, for example, basic needs like food, house. So, as per World Bank, the poverty line was recently updated. Poverty line was recently updated on the basis of purchasing power parity. Purchasing power parity. Now, first thing first, what is purchasing power parity? Suppose I have to buy this pen in India. So what is going to be the cost of this pen in India, and what is going to be the cost of this pen in particular country, for example say USA. So suppose in case of India this pen is of say 1000 rupees, and in case of USA it is of say $100. So in that case $100 will be equal to 1000 rupees. Please note that this is not exchange rate. Exchange rate means how much amount of currency we can get from our domestic currency. Suppose how much rupee we have to spend to get $1. This is exchange rate. Exchange rate. Purchasing power parity means we are comparing the purchasing power of different currencies. So in this particular example, the currency of India, that is rupee, and the currency of USA, that is dollar, are being compared. That means their purchasing power is being compared. So in terms of purchasing power parity, the recent poverty line is $2.15 per person per day. Previously it was $1.90 per person per day. So this is the international poverty line. International poverty line. International poverty line means globally those who have more than $2.15 per person per day, they are not poor. So suppose this is the line of $2.15 per person per day. So those who are having less than this, they are below poverty line. On the other hand, those who are having higher than this amount, they are above poverty line. So this is the concept of poverty line. That means this much amount of resources we need for basic minimum survival. This is like a cutoff in our exam. Cutoff in exam. That means this is the minimum amount of marks you need for the next stage. So as per World Bank, the poverty line is $2.15 per person per day. If we talk about India, so the first attempt for the estimation of poverty line was done by Dadabhai Naroji in his book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. Un-British Rule in India. Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. So this was the first attempt. Post independence, we had a planning commission. Now the current poverty level or current poverty line in case of India is based on the recommendations of Tendulkar Committee. And as per this committee, it is 816 rupees per person per month. This is in case of rural areas and 1000 rupees per person per month. This is going to be in urban areas. So this is the present status of poverty line in case of India and globally. So let me summarize it. As per World Bank, the most recent is $2.15 per person per day. On the other hand, in case of India, it is in rural area, it is 816 rupees per month per person, and in case of urban areas, it is 1000 rupees per person per month. So this is the poverty line. That means the people who are below this, they are below poverty line. It is also known as head count ratio. Okay, so far we have discussed what is poverty. Poverty is a state where we do not have sufficient resources for our basic minimum life. What is poverty line? That means the amount which you need for your basic survival. Now, we are going to discuss the types of poverty. So, it is of two types. One is absolute poverty. And second one is relative poverty. Absolute poverty means we do not have resources, as simple as that, for our basic life. Insufficient resources for basic life. This is absolute poverty. Relative poverty means in comparison. So let me give you one simple example. Absolute poverty means suppose the poverty line was $2.15 globally. So if someone is having only $2, that means they are not having sufficient resources for their basic minimum requirements. So this is a case of absolute poverty. Relative poverty means suppose I am having $10 per person per day, but if someone, say this is person A1, the person A2 is having $100 and person A3 is having $1,000 per day. So it should be noted that A1 is technically not poor, because as per the standards or as per the WB, that is World Bank estimates, the line is 2.15. So I am having more than 2.15. That means there is not a case of absolute poverty. But if this person is going to compare his lifestyle to the lifestyle of A2, then obviously he is going to feel that he is poor. Similarly, A2, if A2 is going to compare his lifestyle to the lifestyle of A3, then he is going to feel that he is poor in comparison to A3, and so on. So one thing that should be kept in mind is that relative poverty shows the income inequality in society. Okay, so these were the types of poverty. One is relative, one is absolute. Now we are going to discuss the causes of poverty. One more thing, causes of poverty means what are the factors responsible for the poverty in our country. So as of now, the Tendulkar Committee recommendations are the basis for poverty estimation in our country, and as per that it is 816 and 1000. And as per these recommendations, 21.9% population is below poverty line in our country. 21.9% is, that means roughly 1/5 population of our country is below poverty line. Okay, now we are going to discuss the causes or factors. So first and foremost factor is colonial exploitation. What does that mean? See, Britishers conquered India and they exploited India. So their policies were directed in order to exploit our country. That is why they destroyed the domestic industry of India. Domestic industry of India was destroyed, and people were forced to move towards agriculture. The agriculture sector was commercialized. Apart from that, there was huge land revenue, revenues collection. That means the farmers had to pay a huge amount of revenue to the British government. That is why they did not had sufficient resources to invest back in agriculture, and that is how the productivity in agriculture became stagnant. Stagnant means more or less constant. Or it is not progressing. So the productivity in agriculture sector became stagnant. So first factor is causes. So first factor is agriculture became stagnant. Why it became stagnant? Because of colonial exploitation or colonial policies. Agriculture became stagnant and the productivity when I say agriculture became stagnant, it means the productivity in agriculture became stagnant. Okay. Apart from that, another factor was huge amount of another factor was population growth. So the growth in our population was quite significant. In fact, it was much faster than the speed of resources with which our resources can grow. So that is another factor which created a problem. And because of this population growth, the population density also increased in certain areas. Population density. Now, how population density is connected to poverty? See, the areas which are heavily dense in terms of population, they face a problem of sanitation. So, population density will lead to poor sanitation. One example is slums. In case of slums, the population density is very high and this also leads to poor sanitation facilities. And poor sanitation will lead to poor health. Now there are two major factors. A, the person is not healthy, therefore the person will not be able to work properly. If the person is working, he or she will not be able to work properly. If the person is going to school, his education or her education will be hampered. So this is how population density is connected to sanitation, and sanitation is subsequently connected to health. Then it will lead to unemployment, and this will lead to poor skill and poor education. Okay. So first we had discussed colonial exploitation, second we discussed population, then population density, then sanitation, then health, then employment, and then skill as well as education. That means poor skill, poor education, unemployment or underemployment. What is underemployment? See, in case of India, roughly 50% population is engaged in agriculture sector. However, their contribution in GDP is less than 20%. So, more than 50, if we assume the total population of our country is 100, more than 50 are involved in or engaged in agriculture sector, and they are contributing only 20 or even less than 20 if we talk about updated data. So that is how this is showing disguised unemployment. plus underemployment. Underemployment. Underemployment means you are working in a sector which is beyond your economic potential. That means you are, suppose you can teach students, but rather than doing that, you are involved in some other work just for basic survival. Disguised unemployment means a person feel that he is employed, however, the marginal productivity is quite low. That means his contribution, his economic contribution is quite low. Okay. So far we have discussed these two factors. Now, apart from this, another factor is disasters. Okay, how disasters are responsible for poverty? There are two major components. A, impact of disaster in terms of agriculture. Suppose there is a situation of flood or drought. In that case, agriculture sector will be adversely impacted. Now we have just discussed that more than 50% population is engaged in agriculture sector. So that means it is going to have an adverse impact on that 50% population. This is first instance. Second is that because of disasters, the population sometimes need to migrate from that particular area. Migration. Take example of Josimath. So in that case, the population was living properly. However, after the disaster, they will have to shift to some other location, and this leads to loss of employment. It also leads to loss of property. Okay. So we have discussed these factors. Apart from that, there are a lot of other factors. For example, gender equality. So far we have covered how many factors? 3. So number 4 is gender-based discrimination. Social discrimination. For example, the level of poverty vary from caste to caste. So caste-based discrimination. How caste-based discrimination leads to poverty? See, in certain areas, even now, these caste practices are followed very seriously. So the employment depends on caste, and that is how the economic potential is hampered. So social discrimination on the basis of caste, on the basis of religion, may also lead to poverty. Apart from that, we have to discuss the sectors of economy, that how they are responsible for poverty. So first, our primary sector is agriculture. So in agriculture, we have already discussed that the growth in agriculture is quite stagnant, and roughly 50% population is engaged in it, and they are contributing less than 20%. If we talk about secondary sector or industrial sector or manufacturing sector, it is labor intensive. Labor intensive means it can provide employment to a large number of population. Then what is the problem? Problem is that in case of India, the contribution of this secondary sector is not that much as it should have been. So the contribution of secondary sector is low. In comparison to that, the tertiary sector is major contributor. But the problem with tertiary sector is that it is leading to jobless growth. Jobless growth. What is jobless growth? That means economic growth is there. So the sector is growing, but it is not providing employment opportunities. So it is not providing that much employment opportunities. So this was our fifth dimension. See, this list is not, it is not possible to list out all the parameters, but the most important thing is that you should have some ready-made points. So first and foremost was colonial past. Our colonial past had an impact on our agriculture sector. It had an impact on the productivity of agriculture sector. Then the population also play a key role in poverty. Because of population there is high density. Apart from that, because of population there is a pressure on resources. Pressure on resources. It also leads to poor health infrastructure, poor employment opportunities, poor skill development, poor education, unemployment, underemployment. Apart from that, the disasters or natural calamities are also responsible. Sometimes they lead to migration, and because of this migration sometimes there is a loss of employment, there is a loss of property. Then we had discussed gender based discrimination. For example, if we talk about male and female, so as per a report, the house headed by female are more prone to poverty. Apart from that, we have discussed social parameters or social discrimination factors like discrimination on the basis of caste, which will lead to poor health, education, employment opportunities. Subsequently, discrimination on the basis of religion, again it will lead to poor skill development, education, health, and overall employment opportunities. Apart from that, we have discussed that the sectors of our economy are not able to generate the proper employment in our country. Agriculture sector is more or less stagnant. Of course, it is providing employment to a large number of population, but economic contribution is not that much. Then secondary sector is not providing that much employment opportunities. Of course, it can provide. There is huge potential in secondary sector. It is labor intensive. Labor intensive means it can provide employment to a large number of population. Tertiary sector is leading to jobless growth. That means it is growing, but it is not providing that much employment opportunities. Apart from that, climate change is another factor that is responsible for poverty. Again, it may have adverse impact on agriculture. That means because of climate change, agricultural productivity will decline. It may also lead to migration. Then poor infrastructure is another problem. Then corruption is another problem. Because of corruption, there is an instance of black money. So it will lead to economic loss for the country, for the nation. Apart from that, there is a problem related to resource utilization. For example, the government have limited resources. So these resources should be used for, say, subsidies or they should be used for infrastructure or for capacity building. Capacity building. So this is another challenge in front of the government, and in case of poor resource utilization, it will be a problem for the country. Okay, so these were some of the factors. Again, you can add your own points into this. The list is not exhaustive. Now we are going to discuss the government policies. Government policies or government schemes, government initiatives for poverty eradication. So let's discuss them sector wise. For example, for house we have Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Awas Yojana. For financial inclusion, we have Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. Jan Dhan Yojana. For credit facility, we have Mudra Yojana. Mudra Yojana. And we have PM Swanidhi scheme. PM Swanidhi scheme. PM Swanidhi scheme is for street vendors. Street vendors. So under this scheme, the credit facility is provided to street vendors. Apart from that, for food related initiatives, we have National Food Security Act, that is NFSA. National Food Security Act of 2013. Under this, government provides subsidized food grains. Apart from NFSA, there is midday meal scheme. In midday meal scheme, food is provided to the students, so it will address two problems: A, problem of hunger, and B, it will also address the problem of school dropouts, because now students have an incentive that they are going to receive food in the school. Apart from that, we have Poshan Abhiyan for nutrition. Then for skill development, we have Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. Apart from that, for employment generation, we have National Rural Livelihood Mission. We have National Urban Livelihood Mission. We have MG Narega, that is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, MG Narega. So these initiatives are for employment generation. Apart from that, in order to boost manufacturing in our country, we have Make in India. We have Startup India and Stand Up India to promote entrepreneurship in our country. Then we have Digital India to promote digital awareness. Apart from that, we have Ayushman Bharat for health sector. Then for education sector, we have Right to Education. We have Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, and the most recent one is National Education Policy. National Education Policy. Okay, these are some of the initiatives. Again, the list is not exhaustive. You can add your own points, but the problem is that you should have at least some points on your fingertips so that you can answer the question in a much better manner. Apart from that, your schemes should be multidimensional. For example, these are related to financial inclusion, this is related to employment generation, this is related to housing facility, this is related to credit facility, this will lead to skill development, these will lead to better entrepreneurship as well as manufacturing initiatives, this will lead to better health infrastructure, then this will address the problem of hunger. So this is how your answer can be multidimensional. Now, in the end, we are going to discuss what are the challenges or what are the problems, why we are not able to eradicate poverty so far. So, first, or let me write it, challenges in poverty eradication. First and foremost challenge is that the data we have, data is not updated. For example, our poverty line is on the basis of Tendulkar committee. So data is not that much updated, and that is why we do not have clear picture. Second problem is inclusion and exclusion errors. What does that mean? It means some people are included, some people are excluded. Now, those who are genuine beneficiary, that means who should receive the benefits, they are sometimes excluded. Those who do not need it, by fraud manners, they are included in the beneficiary list. Like recently, there was a news report that some of the affluent families have received home under PM IAS Yojana. That means they are living in bungalows and they have received a home under PM IAS Yojana. So this is something which is a serious problem. Apart from that, there is lack of convergence in different schemes. Another problem is that the issue of poverty is not a one-dimensional concept, not a one-dimensional issue or a one-dimensional problem. It is multi-dimensional. That means government need to follow multi-dimensional approach, or to be specific, government need to follow holistic approach for the poverty eradication. Apart from that, there is a problem in the implementation. So there is a scope of corruption, policy gap. Policy gap means the policies are framed in such a manner that these schemes do not converge. For example, health, education, skill development, all these schemes should have a converged goal. That is lacking as of now. So there is a policy gap and there are implementation related challenges. Implementation related issues. Apart from that, the another problem is that lack of focus on capacity building. That means most of these schemes just provide benefits. They do not focus on the capacity development. That is why the beneficiaries of these schemes are dependent on the government of the day. Government dependency is there. And because of this, sometimes there is a vote bank politics. So these are some of the problems because of which we are facing challenges in the poverty eradication. So in this entire lecture we have discussed what is poverty, what are the types of poverty, absolute poverty, relative poverty, then what are the causes or factors responsible for poverty, then we have discussed various government schemes, and in the end we have discussed the challenges in the poverty eradication. Now there is one question for you. Question is, what is poverty? Highlight the government initiatives. Highlight the government initiatives for poverty eradication. For poverty eradication. Also specify the challenges in poverty eradication. Okay, so that was all in this particular lecture. Now we have to cover next topic.